Welcome to Season 5 of How I Made It Through, and thank you for joining us. I have invited Ray Catania, author, metaphysical teacher, and coach, to join me as my co-host as we aim to engage, challenge, inspire, and teach you, our listeners, what it really means to be a spiritual being having a human experience. We'll explore not just concepts, but attempt to unravel the neuroscience of metaphysics, as well as practices designed to expand consciousness, increase healing, and develop a profound connection to love. We'll explore God, death, the afterlife, and pushing past limitations as we encourage you to break free of the trance of fear so that you may experience greater freedom, peace, and connection to yourselves, each other, and spirit. So today, our guest is Brian D. Smith, who is a certified grief educator, life purpose coach, and positive intelligence coach. His mission is to help people rediscover who they are and why they are here. Remember those questions, who they are and why they are here. Brian believes the secrets to surviving this life and thriving lie in those two questions. After the passing of his daughter, Shayna, in 2015, Brian dedicated his life to understanding how to process grief and help others navigate life. Brian says, if you're feeling stuck, it's most likely because you've forgotten the answer to one or both of these questions. Brian's vision is to create a world where everyone has a sense of purpose and fulfillment. If we know why something is happening, if we can give it meaning, we can endure just about anything. Brian wants to remind everyone of their true nature and reason for being. Brian is also the host of Grief to Growth podcast, the author of Grief to Growth, Planted, Not Buried, and the creator of Grief to Growth YouTube channel. He appears on podcasts and frequently at events and conferences. It's such a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Brian. Really appreciate it.
Well, one of the reasons we were drawn to you, and particularly Ray has been on your show and he alerted me to you, is because a lot of people can look at things like mediumship, life after death, near-death experiences, and think it's just woo-woo. It's just magical thinking. But you, with a background in engineering and the kind of brain you are imbued with and the curiosity that you have, you're able to shed light on some scientific validity to that as well. And I'm so curious to hear more about that.
Well, my background is going back to when I was a child is fundamentalist Christianity. So I was taught, okay, this is what's true and just accept it on faith. And so that's where I started. But I had a crisis because that didn't make any sense to me. The idea of a God that would send people to hell and some of the stuff that again, a very rigid, very fundamentalist point of view. That didn't make sense, but I've always had this curious mind. When I was a little kid, I used to literally tear things apart to see how they worked. So when I got to in my, I guess, 20s or so, it's like, I need to find out, is this true? What's it true? What's it based on? So I started finding, this was pre-internet. So I was going to the bookstore and finding every book I could. And I would just, it's funny because I think about it now, I would intuitively be led to books, even though I didn't believe in that. I would just walk in the spiritual section and just pick up a book and like, this is what I should read. So I started studying, and then I was surprised to find out there's a lot of science behind things like mediumship, by near-death studies, after-death communications. And not that science in the materialistic point of view is the be-all and end-all, but it does back up what it is that we believe. And the more and more I study, I realize that what religion and philosophers have told us for tens of thousands of years, science is catching up now and saying, yeah, this is true. And the farther along we go, the more those two things are coming together. So what I try to do is help people understand this is not just wishful thinking. We're not deluding ourselves. We have good reason to believe that this is true.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even in my own experiences, delving into the scientific aspect of it and bringing forth the fact that it's not all woo-woo. There scientific information that can back up the things that we can do and that we can see. And Brian's really, has been doing this for a very long time. And I just think that, first I want to say I love the work that you do. And I just think that, Grief to Growth, what you've done with the website and your work is just absolutely phenomenal. So I just want to add that and throw that in there because I think it's really important.
Thanks, I
You're very
appreciate
welcome.
that. Yeah.
Well, part of the reason that I'm drawn to do the work that I'm doing is because I know so many people are suffering in two fundamental ways around this issue of our own mortality. It's when they have lost a loved one, like you lost your daughter. And again, I'm so terribly sorry to hear that, but also fearing their own death. And the work you do and what I'm beginning to hear about your community really helps with both of those things. Can you say a little bit more about the community and what it serves and how it serves?
And the community that I've built, it's bringing people together that have this like mind, that want to explore deeper, that want to support each other, that want to talk about things you can't talk about with your family or your friends. They'll think you're crazy, or they'll think you're morbid, or they'll think, whatever. So now it's a place where you can feel safe, where people can say, yeah, when my daughter passed away, I didn't want to be here anymore. Or you can say, yeah, I know I had someone that took their own life, and my church tells me that they're in hell eternally. So all those things you might not be able to express in the community that you're in now, we come together and we support each other, and we share resources, we ask questions, and we've got experts there that can answer your questions. So someone asks about life between lives, we have life between life experts. So we'll answer your question for you. So I wanted to have a safe place to ask anything and explore anything. Grief is a very complicated thing, and we have all kinds of feelings and emotions around it. We might feel sad, but we also might feel relieved.
Yeah.
It might be a person that you had a complex relationship with. So you
Yeah.
may be in one way glad that they're gone, but in the other way, of course, you're missing them. There's a lot of guilt involved a lot of times,
Yeah.
especially when a parent loses a child. So we're able to talk about that. Yeah, I feel I should have stopped them, or I should have known, or stuff like that.
Can I ask you, you mentioned earlier how you began to notice that you had that connection with your daughter after she passed. What were some of the preliminary things that you saw or felt that led you down that path?
Well, before Shayna passed, I believed in an afterlife, but I didn't know about signs. I didn't know about synchronicities. I didn't know about continuing relationships. And the first sign that I remember was a few weeks after she passed. This was in August, so she passed in late June. So probably 6 or 8 weeks after she passed, my wife and I took our other daughter on vacation. And just out of desperation, I said, I need a sign from you today. I was having a rough day. So I get up early and I walk every morning. So I got up early and I walked. And I said, okay, our thing is not going to be finding pennies. I want to find a dime. So I just said, I like to find a dime a day. Let me find a dime and let me know you're here. And we were getting in the van to take the ferry across to the island we were going to. And my wife and daughter got in one seat. And I bent my head down to get in the back seat. And as I bent my head down, I looked under the seat and there was a single dime sitting there. And I was like, wow, maybe this is real. Maybe this sign thing isn't just people deluding themselves, right? Because, oh yeah, I found a penny. It's my uncle, that kind of thing. But when you ask for something specific and you get it, it's the timing. And since then, it's just been, continuous stream of things that Shayna has done. Some want it, some not so want it. She'll mess with my computer. And it's funny because the lights in my office, they're automated. I have an Alexa, so I tell Alexa to turn the lights on. The last few days, my lights have been coming on by themselves. I don't know if that's Shayna or not, but I'm like, "Are you trying to tell me something?" So I'm looking for those things now as I didn't before.
As a medium, I can tell you they definitely mess with electricity and things
Oh,
of that nature.
So,
yeah.
That's right.
gentlemen, I have to tell my heart is pounding. So, right as I sat down at my desk, there was a dime, and I'm like,
Mm.
"Why
Oh,
is there
wow.
a dime?" And I'm, in my 50s, so I can't see, and I'm trying to look at it, and I'm like, "What is the date? What is the date? And why is this dime here?" So, right before we came on, I took a picture
Okay.
of the dime so that I could expand it, and it's 2019.
Wow.
There's a dime on my desk that I did not put I use a debit, I never use cash, I don't coins are not a part of my life, and it was right here.
That is really weird. I mean, this is happening more. I have a client I am working with and she was telling me that she found the dime. I forget where she found the first one. Oh, it was like a little purse thing she had, on her desk at work, but she said, "I never" she carries her cords in, that's what it was. She said, "I never put change in it." And a
Hmm.
dime fell out of it. She goes, "There shouldn't have been a dime there." And then her husband found a dime, like, at the top of the stairs in their house. And then she was talking to someone else about my daughter, Shayna, and he mentioned a couple of dimes that he had found. So I don't know what's going on with that.
Because I was just thinking, obviously in preparation for the show, I was learning about you and Shayna, and I was just staring in your daughter's face. She's so beautiful. It really touched my heart. Like, why the hell is there a dime here? I'm sorry. I'm just like, my heart
That's
is pounding.
bizarre. Wow.
Well, I think it's connected. I think it's connected.
Yeah.
So I love these two questions that you ask. Why are we here? Who are we? And then also the third, where are we going? And I had asked you if you don't mind repeating how you begin, how you endeavor to support people in finding answers for themselves, especially with the knowledge you have and the belief systems they show up with.
Sure. The first thing I do is I ask people where they are. So actually, I'll actually do a survey with them and ask them, what are your beliefs now? What do you think about who you are, where you're going, why are you here? And these are questions that are usually percolating in the back of our mind, but we don't really ask aloud a lot. Again, unless we're in crisis. And when people come to me, of course, they are in crisis. So what do you believe now? And a lot of times people will believe, well, I'm my body or I'm my mind or this is really wild, but people will think they're their thoughts. They don't understand that we have thoughts. They think they are their thoughts. So what I start to do is again start with where are you? And then they're not usually wrong. We're not wrong about being our bodies. We're very, very much closely associated with our bodies while we're in them. But I try to help them to expand on that, to understand that's part of who you are. That's who you are right now. That's not all of who you are. And so we start there and then we work our way out and work our way up and try to reach that higher perspective. But as humans, we have this dual kind of nature that we are trapped in the body, if you want to look at it that way. But we also have that higher self, that higher state. So then I want to work with people. How do I reach that higher state when I need to? I don't think we can stay there, but we can always try to get back there. And that's the thing. Like that's the mental fitness I teach people. It's like how to get back to that state, how to remember who you are, remember why you're here. And when you know why something is happening to you, it makes all the difference in the world. You can endure pretty much anything as long as you know it has a purpose. It's when it doesn't have a purpose, when it's random or when it's being inflicted on you, that's when it's unbearable.
Mhm.
So well said. I think the traumas and the tragedies in our lives are there for a purpose. They are there for us to learn from them and to grow from them. And when there is that silver lining that you can find, it makes it more bearable. And I firmly believe that. Can, what sort of advice do you give to the person who is just experiencing this loss after you kind of get to know them? How do you give them that? Is it reassurance that the loved one is okay?
The first thing is like you can make it through this, that you can survive this. And I always go back to where I was when my daughter passed. I didn't even want to be here. I didn't think I could ever find purpose in my life. I didn't think I'd ever find joy in my life. And I know that that's where people are in those early stages. So I call it the white knuckle phase. So the first thing is we're just white knuckling through this. We're just trying to hang on. We're trying to get to the next minute, the next day. When we talk about gratitude practices, again, a very lofty thing, I try to people start with, are you warm? Are you safe? Are you full? Right? Just in this moment. Let's not go like 10 years down the road or 5 minutes down the road. Are you okay right now? So getting people to meet them where they are and then offering the fact that there is hope, and I will tell people sometimes if you don't have belief right now, that's okay. Let me believe for you. Let me hold that space for you. Just believe that you can believe. Some people aren't there yet, very few, but I've had a couple that have come to me. I'm like, you're not ready. You're not even ready to try to take that first step. You've got to have that willingness to take that first step. But if you've got that, then you can make the choice and you can get there.
That was actually my next question. Are there cases where you have to say you're not ready yet? And
I can think of one. Yeah, there were I said a couple, but it's actually there was one, and this person just they actually called me, they emailed me, but they weren't ready to listen to what I was trying to say to them. All they wanted to do was go back into the tragedy and go back into the pain and why me and why him and why did they do this to him? And I just I knew it wouldn't do any good for either one of us for me to take that person at that time.
And in mediumship, they actually teach us never to read for a sitter who's lost someone within a 6-month period minimum, because they are not ready to have that experience yet. They're not
Mm.
ready they're not ready to really take that in yet. So a year is really ideal, but never before 6 months.
Yeah, I would push back against that a little bit because it's different for everybody. I wouldn't say it's time, but there are people that aren't ready yet. Now, I know that I have a lot of friends that are mediums, and sometimes people will come through. The spirit is ready. They're like
Oh, yeah.
they're
Oh,
coming through
there's no
right
question.
away.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but for the person, yeah, everybody's going to be a little bit different, I think, in terms of when they're ready. And with this person I'm talking about, right now, I'm thinking about it wasn't a time thing. It wasn't how long it had been since her husband
Yeah.
had died. It was her mindset. It was where she was. And it's tragic because you want to help that person, but we can't do the work for them.
No, I mean, we're all coaches. We all know that space when you know there is a path forward and we could facilitate. You can't do the learning or the healing, but you can facilitate the process. But
Mhm.
if they're not ready, they're not ready. And when you care so much, it's hard just to go, this isn't the right time. And you can come back thinking of both emotion and timing. I often hear people saying, gosh, I love this person and he and I or she and I or they and I were so close. So close. And yet everyone else is getting signs and I'm not getting a sign. Why am I not getting signs? Why are they not reaching out to me? And what I hear repeatedly, and I'd love to hear from both of you, what you have experienced or know or hear, that often it is the frequency of the sadness, the despair, and the grief that blocks. It's not that the person isn't reaching out to you, but your frequency and your sorrow makes it difficult to be open to that communication. What do
Yeah.
you think about that?
That I remember when I first heard that, it kind of bothered me a little bit because it's like, well, as the person in grief, it's like, okay, well, you're blaming me and
Mm,
you're telling me I need to raise my vibration. What does
yeah,
that mean? And
yeah.
how do I do that? So I always with stuff like that, I try to like, okay, why would that be? And I talked to someone who had a near death experience, and she put it better than anybody I've heard. I've heard a lot of good analogies. She said, for the person in spirit, it's like she said, if you ever been scuba diving or snorkeling, when you go down the depth, the deeper you get, the more pressure you feel. So
Mm,
it's difficult for them to reach us when we're at this level, especially if we're like really low. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't some spirits who can, because maybe they're more in better shape, or maybe they're more experienced, or whatever it is. Because I've heard people that have been in really, really deep grief that have had those breakthroughs. So I would say if you're in deep grief, you're making it's more difficult for us to have that experience with our loved one. The other thing that people need to understand is there are many different ways of people sending signs, and people in spirit, some are more proficient at certain things than others. So when we say, I want dimes like Brian gets, but maybe we're getting butterflies, or maybe we're getting dreams, or maybe it's songs in the radio. So you have to be open to all the different forms of spirit communication there are. Because I've talked to a lot of people say, well, I'm not getting dreams. And it's like, well, but and then as we talk, they'll tell me about amazing signs they're getting. So be grateful for however you're getting that communication.
So I'm curious for both of you because I know you are both members of IANS, the International Association of Near Death Studies. There have been so many studies about the process of passing over and what people experience on the other side. And thematically, there are some things that come through, and there's also so much that we're learning that it really depends on the belief of the person who has crossed the veil. What are some of the stories or themes that personally you both hold as guideposts in your own process of facing your own deaths?
Well, that's a great question because going back to near death experiences, they're so different. They're so varied. And some people say, well, that means they can't be true because heaven can't be like all these things. Well, sure it can. We have very we have varied environments in this world. We're in different climates. We have cities, we have country, we've got, different things. So the spirit world, if you want to call it that, is varied. And what I've heard is when we initially cross over, we're going to be in a state very similar as to what we left when we were here. So I think it's really important that we get our mindset right here and get prepared for that crossover. Doesn't mean we're going to stay there necessarily, but when we have some of these experiences that sound disturbing, I think a lot of times it's because people were disturbed when they left here. So that's the conclusion I've come to at this point.
I agree with that totally. And I also would add that the perception of what you're seeing, right? We can both see something here in this reality that is exactly the same thing and take away two different perceptions from it. The same can occur in a near death experience.
Mm.
So they're seeing something from their projection or their perception because they have an expectation of what it may look like. Maybe they're from a particular religion and so they see those images of those prominent individuals. And then there's others from another religion and they may see a prominent individual from their religion. It's not that either one is right or wrong. They're both right. It's a perception. And a perception plays a big part in when we're here, and it also plays a big part when you cross over.
Brian, my biggest fear in life is I have one child, two stepdaughters, but one biological son. And after giving birth and becoming a mother, I was forever changed. And my biggest fear is death. If something ever happened to my baby, because you will always be my baby. And so I look at you knowing that you have moved through that.
Mhm.
So my love is not special for him. Anyone who is a parent who really experiences that knows what I'm talking about as you do. It's extraordinary to me that from that place, you not just found a way to find a way for yourself, but that you provided and you continue to provide an avenue for other people. So using your questions and directing them to you, who are you? Why are you here and where are you going? And how has this played a part in that?
Wow. Okay. I don't know how much time we have. What's
Cut to the surface.
I want to say this. I didn't get here overnight.
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking to people, I don't want people to say, I can't see being where Brian is, ever, because I felt that way. So after Shayna passed, series of synchronicities, signs, et cetera, led me to a group called Helping Parents Heal. And I saw people who were 8 or 9 years out at that time, like I am now. And I saw where they were, but I still couldn't even aspire to be where they were. So the first thing was, okay, I have to stay here for Kayla, my other daughter, and for my wife, Tawana. So I have to stay here. I don't have a choice. And then I met someone in a meeting once. It was a woman who had lost a daughter, and she was miserable, make everybody in the room miserable. And I said, okay, I can't be that guy. So if I'm going to stay here and I can't be that person, then I have to do something about this. So I started, work with helping parents heal first as someone who was attending the meetings, then as someone who was leading the meetings. And so Shayna, it's been 8 years now, probably after 4 or 5 years after Shayna passed. That's when I got to the point where I was like, really say, I'm going to formalize this and help other people. I've also learned events, and it's wild since Shayna passed. I've learned about soul planning and soul groups and all that kind of stuff. I don't see Shayna's passing as a tragedy. I don't see it as a mistake. I see it as a plan. Shayna gave us signs when she was younger about, like, she said, I never want to grow up. She said things like, I'm not scared of death. And we didn't think about any of this when she was at the time. And just one little sign, even before she passed, after she passed away, a few weeks or a few days later, we were deciding what to do with her body. And we're deciding cremation or burial. So we decided on cremation. And we talked to our other daughter about it. We said we decided to cremate Shayna's body, not Shayna. cremate Shayna's body. Is that okay with you?" And she goes, "Yeah, that's what Shayna will want." We're like, "Really?" She said, "A couple of weeks ago, Mother's Day, Shayna passed on June 24th. Mother's Day, Shayna was playing with her cousins and said, 'When I die, I want to be cremated and buried under a tree.'" Why would a healthy 15-year-old girl say that? And
Mhm.
we asked our other daughter, "Were you talking about this?" She said, "No, it was just totally out of the blue." I know why Shayna passed early. I know it was so that I could do this work. I know it was so my wife would be transformed, my other daughter would be transformed, the people I talked to, Shayna's friends. There was a group of girls. Shayna was 15 when she passed. These girls right around her age, they started calling themselves the Shayna Six. When they went to college 3 years later, they were writing their college essays about Shayna. So she's touching people now. So that's who I am. That's why I'm here. And going back, my grandfather was a minister. His parents were ministers. I always felt called to the ministry in some form, but I was like, okay, that's not going to work out for me. I feel like what I'm doing now is a ministry. So it's part of our lineage. So that's what I believe.
It's beautiful.
There's something that I really like. You say, what does planted versus, I want to get this correct. What does planted versus buried mean, or something like that?
Mhm.
Am I saying that correctly?
Planted, not buried. Yeah.
That's it. Planted, not buried.
Yeah,
And
it
so,
kinda comes from something that Jesus said. He said, "Unless a grain of seed falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit." Paraphrasing. And I believe that when I know that when we lose someone like a daughter at the age of 15, we feel like we've been buried. It's like, "This is it. I am done." So we bury something, it's not coming back, right? We bury it because it's not coming back. But we plant a seed. It sits in darkness for a while. It may be cold, all those things, but eventually the water reaches it, the sun comes out, the soil warms, and it comes back something greater than it was when you put it in the ground. And I believe that's what we can do with our grief. We can take our grief, we can plant it like a seed. It doesn't grow overnight. It doesn't happen right away. It may not be a month or 6 months or a year or 6 years, but eventually it'll turn into something that's great.
that is beautiful.
Mm,
Absolutely.
that's beautiful. When someone is going through grief, what is one, doesn't even need to be one, but are there certain things that you find that you share that helps at least like, okay, I can get out of bed. Okay, I can brush my teeth. Oh, I can, whatever it is that feels just hard about being human.
Yeah, it's I find is people always wanna be somewhere that they're not. They wanna be further along. Say, I'm not doing this right. I'm not doing this well." And I'm like, "Okay, you're here, you're talking to me. You got up this morning, you got out of bed, you did get dressed, you brushed your teeth. That's something. Wherever you are, it's okay. Wherever you are in your grief journey, it's where you're supposed to be. Don't compare yourself to somebody else. Don't let someone tell you it's been 6 months, it's time to get over your grief. It's been a year, it's time to get over your grief. Well, first of all, grief is not a disease. We don't get over it. It's not something we're trying to put behind us. We're not trying to cure our grief. We are learning to honor our grief. We're learning to live with our grief. I still grieve my daughter, and I always will. That's the fact of life, and that's okay. I have a client. She said something. It's beautiful. She said, "I don't fight my grief anymore. I don't. I honor my grief. As long as I love my fiance, who had passed away, I will carry this with me, and that's okay. I honor it, and it's propelled me to do things that I wouldn't have done otherwise." So that's what I tell people. It's like, let's not fight this. We're not here to fight our grief. We're not here to overcome our grief. We're not here to beat
Mm,
grief. We're here to live with our grief. We're here to accommodate it and let it teach us what it's here to teach us.
mm. So wise. So wise. I often listen to the show Hacking the Afterlife with a frequent guest on this show, Richard Martini, and his dear friend, Jennifer Schaefer, who is a psychic medium. And her father passed away, and she was channeling him, not channeling, she was speaking, communicating with him. And she was talking about her grief and missing him so much and what he said from flip side, as Richard would call it, is that he said, sweetie, I want you to think of it as time passes, that these feelings that you're carrying of nostalgia, like when you look back at pictures,
Hmm.
that if you can sort of cognitively shift your frame around grief, when you think of me, it's just nostalgia for the time that we had, that you can long for it, but maybe it'll take away some of the sting. And of course, she, of all people, knows that he's not died, but hugs and the physical touch and the, holding someone's hand or waking them up in the morning, all of those things are gone, but it can be nostalgia.
Yeah. You said that, it reminded me of, for us who have had children, I mourned when my children weren't toddlers anymore and I couldn't carry them. When my daughter graduated from high school, I was like, she's not going to live here anymore. So as parents, we can understand we lose those phases anyway. So there's a form of grief that you're going through. So with Shayna, I'm like, it's like Shayna went to college. It's like Shayna went on vacation. That's the way I look at it. I don't. It's not permanent. Nothing is permanent. I'm not going to live in this body forever. And when I close my eyes on this side, I'll open them and I'll see her again.
Yeah.
So it's just it's a phase of our life that we temporarily say goodbye, just like when my other daughter went to college.
Yes. It's so good. As people who study and support people moving through grief and also going on their own journey of understanding why they're here, who they are, where they're going, are there any words that you'd like to leave people with?
I just want to say to people that it's all okay, that everything is temporary, both the good and the bad. So enjoy the good because it's temporary and endure the bad because it's temporary.
Couldn't have said it better. Absolutely perfect. Brian, how can people become part of your new community?
So you go to grief2growth.com. It's grief numeral 2growth.com/community. It's a closed community. You have to apply to be there because I want to keep it a safe space. But, if you're a reasonable person, you'll be accepted. So grief2growth.com/community, and you can find all the information there. And just real quickly, I want to say I have a new course I just launched. It's grief2growth.com/love never dies, no dashes. That's a course you can take online for a lot of stuff I'm teaching through my podcast and everything else.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I personally learned a lot. It's been really meaningful.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
so
you,
much for
Brian.
having me. I enjoyed it very much.
How I Made It Through is produced and distributed by EIQ Media, LLC. Elevate your emotional IQ with podcasts and content focused on overcoming adversity, leadership, mental health, entrepreneurship, spiritually transformative experiences, and more.